Nice. We're back. Second episode. We're at the home of the Scattered Chaos podcast. We put a new TV up. We're really impressed. We're going to get high tech here one day. Also a refrigerator that we're going to stock with some healthy stuff for our guests. And I just want to bring up the shoes that are on the refrigerator. These were curated by a wonderful lady named Raffaella out of Italy. These are Air Jordan 1s that she painted for our nonprofit Urban Paws, which we talked about in the first episode. But I am super excited about this episode. I've known this gentleman for many years. My father's known him way more than I've known him. But his name is synonymous for rock and roll in the Bay Area. His father was in the industry. The industry I'm talking about, limousine. He got into the industry, took over his father's business. Started his own company. He's correcting me as he's watching me. Had his sister involved, who basically ran the company for him. And then eventually he decided to sell the company. For those that don't know him, I want to welcome Butch Henke. Thanks for being here, bud.
Oh, my pleasure.
This is going to be fun.
I'm nervous.
Don't be nervous. You don't need to be nervous.
I tell people I'm a terrible writer and a terrible speaker.
That's okay. We'll try to make this as easy as possible. Thank you for being here. We've known each other many years. You're now part of our team for the last, 5?
You were in high school.
Yeah, that's true. I was in high school when I met everybody. It's interesting how this kind of goes full circle, at least for me and my family, how long you've known my dad, and then, David Lipschultz, and then...
The only man to ever fire me.
Yeah, that's a story in itself. Even though he says he didn't fire you, right?
Yeah,
We talked about that at your birthday.
He's one of my best friends.
He is an amazing human being and industry legend here in the Bay Area also. He's been out for a while now, but you're still rocking and rolling. You're not giving up. You're not ready to give up.
No, I'm not ready to hang up.
No, not yet. Huh?
The wife's been pushing me, but I just said, Lori, when you can pry my hands off the wheel or get me away from the computer.
Then it will work. Yeah. So let's start from the beginning. How long have you been in the industry?
Going on 53 years.
Oh, okay. So do you mind telling me a little bit about like your dad's story and then how you got your own company, that kind of thing?
Well, my dad's had a cab company, and I was still in high school, and after school I'd go play the mechanic on the car because I was basically born under a hood of a car. Yeah. And we were at dinner one night with the family friends, and this fellow tells my dad, why don't you buy a couple of limos and I'll give you the United Airlines crew account. I didn't think anything about it. I think I was 19 or 20.
Sure.
Well, about 6 months later, here comes my father and my stepmother with these two 1965 formal limousines from a funeral home. And I says, what are we going to do with these? He says, you're going to start driving limo. And I went, huh? Ooh. And that's where it started.
And what was the company name at the time?
I think it was AAA, if I remember right.
Okay. And then at what point did you go from the two limousines to eventually where you were in the sense of your growth?
Well, it took a while. The first few years, we'd fly. We drive United Airlines pilots to the local airports, San Jose, Oakland, even out to Stockton. Then we'd do fog runs. We'd drive them down to a local hotel, when they camped out for the night to catch a flight next morning. Drove a lot of stewardesses.
Yeah.
Boy, and I dated a lot of them, too.
Oh, Lori, turn it off. Lori, turn it off.
Yeah, it was fun. And in between flights, me and one of my friends, we had two cars. Okay. We were doing, the limo stuff. And in between flights, when SF only had one building.
Wow.
United Airlines, and I think it was PSA was in there.
Let's go back.
I happened to be there one afternoon, and we'd hustle, which was not actually legal, but
that's what you had to do.
We did it in between flights and stuff, And I happened to, this gentleman walked by one day, and I says, taxi limousine downtown, sir? No, kid, I got somebody coming to get me. Okay, thank you, sir. About 10 minutes later, he walked back and he goes, you really got a limo? I go, yes, sir, it's in the garage. Let's go. Never asked me price or anything. I said, uh-oh. So we get down in the car, we're heading out, and he goes, "You don't know who I am." And I went, "Oh, shit, it's a cop. I'm busted."
That would have been the first thought I had, too.
Yeah, so he says, little casual conversation, he goes, "You like concerts?" And I says, "Yeah, I like music, and stuff." And he goes, "Well, I do concerts." I go, "My name's Bill Graham." I go, "What?" "All right, sir. My pleasure." So chatted a little bit, and the next thing you know, he says, "You got a card?" And I says, "No, sir." "You got a pencil and paper?" I go, "No, sir." So I hear him going through his briefcase. "Give me your phone number." I gave it to him. I get him to the city. I couldn't tell you how much he paid me. But about a few weeks later, my dad calls and says, "Hey, do you remember driving somebody that does concerts or something?" I go, yeah. He was a little gruff looking. He goes, "Well, he wants you to pick up this band." And I said, "Really?" "Yeah, 5 o'clock in the morning at the houseboats in Sausalito." And I says, "Really?" And I says, yeah. I says, "Okay." So I go out there, walking the planks. Good thing I had a flashlight because rats were running everywhere.
Oh, geez.
And the band wound up being Dan Hicks and the Hot Licks. Was the first band I ever really drove.
And what year was that? Do you remember?
Had to be 1970-ish, 71 maybe.
Wow.
Yeah.
I wasn't even born then.
Smart ass.
And we're going to get to that later.
Smart ass.
Wow, that's a crazy beginning.
Yeah. First time I drove the Rolling Stones was like 1972, I believe, at Winterland, 72 or 74.
Okay.
And I drove them for a lot of years, and it was fun.
Yeah.
We had good times, some funny stories.
We'll get to those.
And then actually the next biggest one I drove was, didn't realize who it was John Entwistle from The Who.
Wow.
And that was a funny story in itself. He came into town and with this other guy. We started talking. He took him to a guitar store, and I said, "Oh, you guys with a band?" He goes, "Yeah, The Who." And I go, "Who?" And we played The Who. Who's on first? What's on second?
That's funny. That's awesome.
Yeah. So it went on from there. It just grew.
Did you, when you first started, obviously, meeting Bill Graham, and we're going to talk about the book that you brought with you, which I think is a true representation of how loved you are in that space, But at what point did you know that, like, wow, this is going to become bigger than just a 2-car operation or these 2 limousines, and especially being in the 70s where, stretch limousines were the only thing that were out there?
Well, no, what the stretches really didn't come into the market till like the '84 Olympics. That's when they really took off because everybody was, Olympics in L.A. Oh boy,
The stars.
Yeah, they thought it, and that was a bust.
Yeah.
I even went out and bought one.
Just for that, huh?
Yeah, well, then I think what created my foothold with Bill Graham and his staff was after the Led Zeppelin incident in 1977, which was the anniversary was just this last weekend, the July 22nd, 23rd.
Do you want to talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, it just
for the guests that don't know what you're talking about.
Well, everybody know the Day on the Green shows, which were Bill Graham was the nucleus for basically festivals, I say,
Right.
and brought Led Zeppelin in, and they had a history, they had reputation, and actually when we picked them up, they were supposed to land like 1 o'clock in the morning, and they landed like 5 in the morning. And I think it was a DC-8. We had like 7 cars out there in a luggage vehicle. The door opens, and the next thing I know, I see this body tumbling down the stairs. And he gets up and he kicks the side of the limo. And I said, "Whoa, wait a minute." And I'm a youngster still.
Right.
So here I'm dealing with a major rock band,
Right.
And his name was Richard Cole, was the tour manager. Well, the band had beat him up on the plane.
Wow.
Yeah. So we get him to the hotel and stuff. Then they do the first show. Then there was an incident backstage where Peter Grant's son went to pull this redwood thing, and it said Led Zeppelin, off of one of the dressing drawers. And one of the security guys says, "Hey, you can have that, but let's leave it there till tomorrow, and I'll give it to you."
Right.
Well, the kid went to crying to Peter Grant, and the next thing you know, they're trying to take the security guy into the dressing room and beat the holy living what out of him, and they pretty much did. And Bill went in, and they wound up kicking him out of the dressing room, and he finally got back in by going through a window, and it just turned into a major uproar. And the next thing you know, everybody's scrambling, get the cars lined up, get the cars lined up.
And they were gone.
Off we went,
Whoa.
Then the next day, they're calling me, and I'm texting me, actually, not texting me, paging me.
Right.
Then I have to go to a payphone. Back then we didn't have cell phones.
Right, right.
And says, "Butch, we need to know if they're heading to town." And I says, "I don't think they're going anywhere. They didn't order the luggage truck, and they had like 200 bags when they came in. Wow. I need to know. We can't have a riot, if they don't show up for the second show."
Right.
I said, "Okay, we'll keep you posted." Well, the next thing you know, guys start coming down, the security guys, and say, "Okay, we're going to head to Oakland." Well, apparently they had forced Bill to sign a non-lawsuit thing.
Got it.
And so we went and did the show, but we immediately peeled rubber out of there. They came off the stage, and we were gone. And then the next day, we pull up with the 7 cars to take them to the airport, back to the airport. And the next thing you know, Oakland PD and SFPD surrounds the cars and says, "You're not going anywhere. Who's in charge?" And of course, I raised my hand. "Me. You're not going anywhere." So the next thing they arrested John Bonham, Peter Grant, and a security guy. I can't remember his name.
For beating up the security guard?
They were the guys that had beat up the
security guard.
blue coat at backstage. God rest his soul. He passed away here a few years ago. But that's how it all started, really. And then we had to go over to the Oakland jail and bring them back. Then
they got bailed out, and then you guys took them
yeah,
back
we
to
had
the
to
airport.
bring back the hotel.
Okay.
And stuff. And then, of course, we loaded up the truck with the luggage and everything, and we headed to the airport. And I happened to have a friend that was on the sheriff's department. And I was worried sick. Oh, then in between, I get a call from the record company. Excuse me, saying, "We'd like you to bill the record company for their services." And I told the young lady, I says, "I really don't think that's a smart idea on my part, considering you may not know what took place out here. I don't think it'd be a good idea for me to let this band get out of town without paying.
Right.
You'll never work for us again." I said, "Well, if that's the case, that's the case."
Right.
So tour manager came down, I told him, he says, "No problem, we'll pay you, Well, I had already called a sheriff buddy of mine, and I says, "Hey, I'm a little concerned here because they beat up this tour manager when they flew in." I says, "If you could be out there, but don't be visible,"
Right.
kind of thing. So we get out at the airport, and Richard Cole says, "Butch, come up on the plane." And I went, "Uh-oh, here we go."
Right. You're like, oh, okay, I know what happens here.
Yeah. Well, I got on the plane. Back in those days, they'd played with a lot of cash.
Right.
They counted out all the money, and then he turns to me and he goes, "And the band wants you to have this," and they handed me like $1,500 extra.
Wow. And back then, $1,500 is a lot.
That was a lot of money.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money back then.
Wow. That's a crazy story. And that kind of brings up the book you brought. It's called Before I Forget. It's the Bill Graham Presents, compiled by Rita Gentry. Tell me a little bit about this book.
Well, Rita Gentry worked for Bill Graham for over 20 years, and she's a very dear friend of mine. And she sent out these mass emails to anybody that worked for Bill Graham, no matter how long they worked for him or any, connections with Bill, to ask him to write stories or stuff that she could compile this book. So she happened to call me and says, "Butch, I know you weren't an employee, but you're one of the longest vendors that we've ever had. could you? I told her, Rita, I'm a terrible writer.
Which you told us in the beginning.
Yeah. And says, you must know somebody that could write it for you. Just dictate them. I says, yeah, I got somebody. Thank you, David Lipschultz.
Ah, nice.
So I called David, and I says, David, this is what I need. He goes, give me 10 minutes. So call me back. So call him, and I dictated, basically my story about my relationship with Bill Graham Presents and staff.
Wow.
And
then you got added. You got put in there. You're famous.
Yeah.
You're book famous now.
Yeah.
A lot has happened over your career. I mean, we're going to get to a lot of the different stages. But you, after 50 years of doing this, you've been given a lot of accolades, which you deserve. And as I've gotten to know you more and more over the last 15 years or 5 years personally, you're very humble about it. Like you are more shy about being recognized for all the good you've done for these people.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate. I've been very blessed, I've made a lot of close friends with the music industry,
Yeah.
John Denver was one of my dearest friends. He used to come hang at my house, and
That's a crazy. I mean, can you talk about that? Talk about how you built that kind of relationship where John Denver, one of the greatest artists in the world.
yeah, the writers and performers.
Yeah.
Him and Annie, they were in town one day. Did a show at the Cow Palace, and they were in town for a few days afterwards, and they were talking in the back seat, and I heard John say to Annie, I want to get this magazine. So when they went in, I forget where I took them to, and they went in, I went and got the magazines and had them in the back seat of the car. And that seemed to have really locked it down. John and I became very close. Annie and I, he was like a brother. I mean, I was really close with him.
That's crazy.
My son's middle name is Denver,
Whoa. So
You didn't know that?
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
So Cameron Denver.
Cameron Denver.
Wow. I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
So, obviously, tragically, we lost him.
Yep.
That must have been a really hard day for your family. I would
Well,
assume.
1997, October 19th was probably the worst month and year of my life. John gets killed in a plane crash. Harold Berkman, who was one of my dear friends with Music Express, he dies of leukemia. And my wife asked me for a divorce. October 97.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah. So it just, I thought my world was falling apart.
Yeah, and if we could just jump, we won't talk about the divorce because that's now.
Yeah.
But your relationship with Harold Berkman, and for those that don't know who Harold Berkman is, he's the founder of Music Express.
Yes.
One of, if not the longest limousine companies that's been around. At least
they've been around
a long time.
decades.
Decades. They are LA based.
Yes.
I know they have offices, I think, in other places. I'm not sure now compared to what it was before.
Yeah, I think COVID narrowed a lot of people down.
Yeah, but you had a really close relationship with him.
Yeah, Harold and I were really close.
And how did you meet?
He just started calling me one day and says, I need an affiliate in San Francisco. And everybody tells me you're the guy because you do all the music stuff.
Nice. In 97, what company? Were you guys AAA still, or what company were you guys? Were you Squire?
No, 1997, I'd already sold the company.
Oh, you already sold it?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go back a little bit. So you're working with your dad.
Yeah.
And when did Squire come around?
Squire, well, my dad started buying buses, and I looked at him and I says, Dad, I'm not a bus driver. I don't like them.
Yeah.
It's hard enough keeping 6 sets of eyeballs happy in the back seat of a limo.
Right.
I said, but 50 sets? There's got to be several assholes back there.
True.
So I hung out for a while, and he started going more in the buses, and I just finally said one day, I says, I can't do it. So I went out and bought my own limo.
Okay.
And it was tough the first couple of years. I actually went back driving cab in San Francisco just to make sure ends meet. I could pay the insurance and, put a steak on the table once in a while and
Right.
take care of my family.
Wow.
And then Bill Graham actually stayed with my dad. And then the limousine part of the business went to crap.
Okay.
And they called me up and said, Butch, can you handle this? I says, of course.
Right.
So
What year is that? Do you remember?
It'd be like 1977 or so.
Still before I was born.
Yeah.
Wow. So 77 Squire was founded.
Yeah.
One car in the beginning?
One car.
For how long?
Not long.
No, I was going to say. It
I
didn't,
went on the hook with the banks.
yeah. So at your, before 98 when you sold, or roughly
It
around
sold in 95.
Okay,
yeah.
so 95. How many cars did you have? What was the most you had?
We were up to like, I think 27, 28 cars.
Okay, and at that time, because the 90s, we had town cars, obviously. So
Town
when
cars had just, basically begun.
the transition from limos to town cars, right?
Yeah, probably the late 80s even,
Okay. And did you ever go anything bigger than, eventually an SUV? Did you do vans?
No, SUVs didn't come in really to the industry till, I guess it would be mid-90s or so. Yeah, probably mid to late 90s.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then by then, you were already kind of exiting with the wholesale to...
Yeah. I sold to Kerry. Actually, I won Operator of the Year, large fleet, in 1995 with a limousine and chauffeur.
Did you really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
You didn't know that?
No, that is awesome.
Yeah.
Whoa, that's some history back then.
Yeah.
Because there were not a lot of large companies back then.
No. Well, back then it was anything over 20 cars was considered a large fleet.
Right.
Well, like I said, I had 27 or 28 cars, and I had enough people write letters to LCT, and I won Operator of the Year, large fleet.
And during that time, did you have? I mean, you met a lot of different operators, right? Obviously.
Oh yeah.
So you were part of the industry. You weren't just localized in the Bay Area.
And back then, there wasn't a whole lot of networking going on.
Sure.
There was only a few of us that actually started networking. Because back then you had to use a fax machine, you had to make phone calls all the time.
Right.
It wasn't the emails and stuff, the convenience of that.
Right.
So
during that time, there were a few of you guys that were really big in the industry, in the music industry, transportation. We obviously CLS was popular at the time. That was prior to Empire being involved. They were, and the Music Express. Do you remember any other companies that were around that during that time that had, were known for being in the music industry in the touring world?
Well, it was Aventura in Florida. Neil Goodman, God rest his soul. I think they've pretty much downsized now. But he was involved in the music industry quite a bit. Because there was a lot of music people who lived in Florida.
Okay.
So, and we did work back and forth, and he was part of the Music Express affiliate thing.
Oh, got it. Was Music Express kind of the biggest affiliate? Back then, at least?
And then of course CLS,
Right.
Charlie Horkey,
Right.
They, pretty much, Music Express, CLS, and not really me. I wasn't doing a whole lot of networking back then.
No.
Yeah.
You were just keeping yourself busy, and that's all you cared about.
Yeah.
And obviously you did fairly well.
Yeah.
Because Kerry, had some interest in you. You were a Kerry partner at the time? Were you involved with Kerry at all?
No, because they had their own franchisee here.
Okay.
Who they had been attempting to buy back for years.
Okay.
And when they bought me, they had accomplished buying back their franchise. Then they bought me, and I don't know, that was the worst mistake of my life.
Yeah.
Selling to them. I just wasn't. I shouldn't have done it.
Right.
And then they bought Don Minke, who had a chauffeured limousine back then. So
Okay.
we put 3 companies in one building within a matter of about 6 to 8 months.
Wow.
And Kerry was on a buying mode because their goal was to go public, which they did.
Okay.
They bought my good friend Johnny Thompson in L.A., a Huntington limousine,
Okay.
and had him running the Kerry office L.A. in L.A.
Wow.
Johnny was one of the founding members of the National Limousine Association.
Really?
And he is probably one of the best dispatchers you'll ever want.
Really?
Yeah, and his son Doug, both of them.
Were amazing.
amazing.
That company is obviously not around anymore, right?
No. John's kind of semi-retired, living in Phoenix, Arizona.
Okay. You still connect with him, don't you?
Oh yeah,
When you
he's
go down there.
considered one of my dearest friends.
That's awesome.
His sister, matter of fact, introduced me to my wife Lori.
That's right. That's okay. Now everything's connected.
In Las Vegas, and what happens in Vegas doesn't always stay
in
there.
Vegas. No, it does not. All right, so let's talk about the transition after the sell of Carrie. What happened next for you?
I kind of went underground because I had a non-compete. You know, they only required me to have an 18-month, and most companies require a 3 to 5 or 10.
Okay.
They only wanted. I said, I ain't signing no 3-year non-compete.
Okay.
So I did an 18-month and a 100-mile radius.
Okay.
So I kind of had John Denver lived in Monterey, which was more than 100 miles away. So I kind of took care of John Denver, you know.
Privately.
I go down and take care of his house and stuff, you know. So,
And then a year and a half passes, and then what happens?
Harold Berkman wants to open in San Francisco. So it wound up being me, John Thompson, and Harold formed Music Express San Francisco.
Oh, okay.
And then, unfortunately, Harold passed away probably a year or so after that, and his daughter Cheryl decided she wanted it all, and she basically kind of forced John and I out, you know. So then, when John and I formed Esquire Chauffeured Services,
Okay.
and that took off amazingly, you know. And we went on from there, and
What year is that? Do you remember?
God. Harold died in 97, probably around late 98 or 99.
Okay. And then Esquire started, and then it just boomed.
Yeah, it took off again, you know, then...
Did most of your clients that you had prior to selling come back to you?
Yeah.
They did. I figured.
I was very fortunate. And it's amazing how much loyalty, and you wouldn't think, but clients were very loyal to me.
Yeah.
You know, and I got very lucky. Like I said, I'm been truly blessed.
Right. So, and then at some point, did you sell to Avalon, or what happened with how did the transition for you to go into Avalon was?
Well, actually, I wind up selling to Cheryl Berkman. Avalon wanted to buy me, the Esquire,
Okay.
and Cheryl came in with a higher offer.
Okay.
And then my wife and I relocated to Arizona. I call it semi-retirement because I was still booking bands. Back then we had computers and,
Right.
you know, and semi-retired down there
Okay.
and hung out there for, you know, a few years. Actually, the day we moved in our house down there, 9/11 happened.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a welcome to Arizona kind of thing.
Welcome to Arizona. And actually, I had my new son,
Yeah.
you know,
Cameron.
Cameron, and I spent a lot of time with him. 6 months, I didn't do a damn thing.
Just spend time with him.
Yeah.
That must have been awesome.
Then I took one town car with me,
Okay.
and I actually, I was at a gas station one day, and I ran into this guy with Execucar, which was owned by Super Shuttle.
yeah.
And I started, what do you guys do? He goes, we're like a black car service. You know, cabs are not at the resorts. It's all black car services, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, really? So he goes, here's a card. Call Jeff Conley. He was the general manager back then.
Mr.
you know?
Conley.
So I went down and met him, and I started driving Execucar down there, you know. Hotter than a pistol in the summer, though, in a black car.
It's 1:15 right now. I just talked to my sister.
And it's been over like 25 days of that, over 110.
Yeah, it's been pretty bad. But
Yeah.
So you were there for a while, 9/11. So you 2001 till about when did you then decide? Did you and Lori decide to come back here?
Well, I was still controlling the music industry, transportation wise in San Francisco, and got a hold of Dave Lipschultz, because he had just started Virgin Limo with Richard Branson.
Yeah.
And we had a discussion, and he goes, "Why don't we fly you up here and have a talk?" So David brought me up, and we talked, and they made me an offer. I could fly back and forth every week, or but still have my dad's house here, and my stepmother's still there, and I'd come up and stay there, during the week and stuff. And,
Right.
but wind up being, we went on for like a month or so, and I said, Dave, it's just not working. I'm not getting as many calls as I thought. Well, I no sooner load up my truck to head back, and I get the call from Neil Young.
Oh,
They say, hey, Butch, we need you to run bridge school again. So
and that's where it started again.
Yeah, and then I got a call for Bruce Springsteen for his first show at the ballpark at AT&T Park back then, and right after that, things just blossomed again.
Yeah, and you started getting connected with pretty much everybody again.
Yeah.
So talk about your, obviously, for those that don't know, you have a very, very deep relationship with Carlos Santana and his family for many years.
They are truly one of the nicest families, organization you ever want to work with.
So how did you meet them? You mind if I ask?
Well, my friend Rita Gentry was working for Carlos.
Ah,
And
small world.
Carlos was using a gentleman who apparently let the service part go down.
Okay.
Rita called me and, hey, Butch, and then I'm going to have somebody call you. And it was Kevin Chisholm, who was his tour manager at the time, and off it went.
Do you remember when that was?
No, I can't even remember. It's
Far back.
probably close to pushing 20 years.
20. That's
And I knew Carlos before that because him and Bill were really close.
okay.
And I'd see him with Bill and stuff,
Right.
And I'd met him a couple times, but, we never really connected.
Yeah.
And then I started driving him, and he is truly one-of-a-kind gentleman.
Yeah, I mean, we've been very fortunate with you being on board that, our LA office, some of the guys get to drive him, and the whole family is amazing.
Oh, just amazing.
The
His
whole
wife,
family.
Cindy Blackman, his wife.
She's a drummer, isn't she?
Yeah, she's a drummer, well known. She was discovered on the streets of Harlem by Lenny Kravitz.
Whoa.
And then she became his full-time drummer.
And then they got married.
Yeah, Lenny Kravitz's full-time drummer.
Oh, Lenny's full-time.
Yeah,
Okay.
and Carlos met her a few times, and things
Blossomed, and they
things
beautiful
blossomed.
relationship.
God bless him.
Yeah, and which is kind of so his head of security, Chad, is good friends with my powerlifting coach.
Yeah, you were telling me.
Remember, so it's like this really weird circle of people knowing each other. So we talk about Carlos Santana, obviously great human being, but you have a very big, tight relationship with Metallica also.
Yeah, I've been almost 40 years now.
40 years with Metallica.
40
Talk
years.
about that relationship.
And that's when they were nothing. I mean,
so how did that come
simple
about?
airports. Bobby Snyder was their tour manager back then.
Okay.
Who still, I think he just moved up to the Nevada City somewhere.
Okay.
But it just, tour managers, they kept, it seems like they passed. None of the tour managers seem to bring in their own camp because the band says this is who we use.
Sure.
One of the stories with John Denver I want to bring up is, John Denver did a September to Remember in Lake Tahoe with Frank Sinatra, and invited me up and my family to see the show. And he had me come backstage with my family and stuff, and we're talking. And he takes me in a room, and here's Frank Sinatra. And I'm going, oh, boy.
Wow.
And he gets right up, shakes my hand, and what do you do? I'm a limo in San Francisco. And he turns around to his assistant, Dorothy, get Butch's card. We need to use somebody new in San Francisco. Next thing you know, I drove Sinatra for over 15 years whenever he came to the Bay Area.
That's just crazy.
Yeah.
That is just nuts. You probably have a ton of stories.
Yeah. Carlos keeps telling me to write a book, and I said, Carlos, I can't write a book.
You can dictate a book.
There's too many of you guys still alive, including yourself.
You'll get in trouble. Copyrighted information.
Happy belated birthday, Carlos.
There you go. So we'll tag Carlos on this so he can listen to it and see his friend on a podcast. I want to talk about stories. Because one of the things that I love about my relationship with you is not only have you, obviously helped this company get to where it's at, and we're all thankful for that, but the amount of knowledge that you've taught me over the course of the last 5 years, I mean, from the basics of having, keeping these drivers in line, understanding the musical industry and how to really, work with these people and everything else you've taught me. I mean, there's things that you taught me that you probably didn't even realize you taught me, of just being a better person and growing up and, learning from people's mistakes. And so, I learned, and honestly, my favorite part of any time we sit down and talk is you have this knack of being able to tell a story every time you sit down with me.
Yeah.
And I love it because I love history and stories like that. So let's top 3 stories that you can think of off the cuff. Give me a couple.
Top 3 stories.
And you don't have to use names if you don't want to get in trouble by the management if there's
No, I can. Probably first band to ever do damage to my car.
Okay.
Kiss.
Really?
Gene Simmons.
Okay.
Cow Palace. I think probably 76 or 70. Their first big tour.
Okay.
And they were on stage. Tour manager says, "Bring the cars in. We have them way up in the back." And they left these big doors open at the Cow Palace, the loading dock area.
Yep, I remember.
And Gene came off and the rest of the band, and Gene looks out. He's got towels and all over him, and he said, "Close them fucking doors." And he's in these tall platform shoes.
Okay.
And he kicks the grill out of my, I think probably a 75 or a 76 limo, kicks the grill out. And I said, "Oh boy, here we go." And they go back on stage. And when they come off final encore to get in the car to hit it, and he says, "Butch, is that your car I kicked?" I said, "Yes, sir." "Make sure we get a bill for it." I go, "It's already on the way over here."
Wow. So, I mean, he took acknowledgement and just, said, "I'll pay for it." No questions asked.
Yeah, no questions asked.
So I mean, obviously that shows the relationship that you had with these people prior to that experience.
Yeah. It's interesting, One of probably the funnest groups that I ever dealt with was Leonard Skinner Band.
Oh,
I love those guys.
That must have been awesome.
Ronnie Van Zant, God rest his soul. Alan Collins, just a great bunch of guys.
Yeah.
But tragically, we know what happened to the band.
Yeah, sad.
Yeah, and some funny stories with them. Whew.
Yeah? Got one to tell me?
Oh, yeah, we're coming out of the airport, Oakland Airport. They flew in, and next thing you know, Kenny, the other driver with me, pulls alongside, and he starts honking, and next thing I look over, and here's, I don't know if it was Cassie or one of the backup singers, hanging their breast out the window. And the next thing you know, Ronnie Van Zant's mooning them back.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, I mean, it went all the way into the city. This went on.
Really?
Just laughed.
But just great people overall.
Just nice people. Yeah.
So obviously we talked about the people that you're really close with, and you talk about even Leonard Skinner's group. And is there one memorable thing that happened to you, maybe even recently, that you're just like?
Well, there's two very memorable things.
Okay.
For me. It involves Carlos. I mean, I think the world of the man.
I know you do.
There's clients that I would take a bullet for, and he'd be one of them. Absolutely.
That's amazing.
He invited my son and I down to Las Vegas to see one of his shows at the House of Blues. Mm-hmm. So hey, Cameron, I said, your mom's going to be in Hawaii seeing Bruno Mars. Do you want to go to Vegas with me to see Carlos? He goes, "Yeah, Dad, that sounds cool." So a little while later, I call him and I say, "Hey, Cam, everything's sold out down there." I said, "I had to put us in a Motel 6. And I says, "But we're going to have to share the bed." He goes, "Dad, I'm on the floor with the bed bugs." That's cute, Cam.
Yeah, good job.
Well, I didn't tell him, but Chad had made an arrangement. He had checked with Carlos. Carlos gets a 2-room suite at the Mandalay Bay for any guests and stuff.
Wow.
And it was available the night of the show, and we were going to stay one night. So we get to the hotel. Chad meets us, and he hands us room keys. And Cameron goes, "What's that?" I says, "Carlos gave us his 2-room suite, top floor." He goes, "You lied to me, Dad."
He's not even talking about the room yet. He just didn't know the fact that you lied to him.
Yeah. So we did that. Then later on, we came down. Carlos had never met Cameron yet.
Okay.
Over the years. So we sit down in the dressing room with Carlos, and he starts talking to Cameron really heavy. And then next thing you know, Carlos grabs a guitar and starts jamming in the dressing room, and Cameron's going. And Cameron had been taking guitar lessons.
I remember you telling me this. Yeah.
And we're sitting there, and Cameron's eyes are just getting bigger and bigger, and he goes, "Carlos is just killing it on the guitar." So next thing, Chad comes in, and he goes, "Hey, it's sound check time, Carlos. We got to go." So we went out and watched part of it, So Cameron and I left, went and had dinner. We came back, and we had seats. And towards the end of the show, I get a text from Chad. He says, "Hey, Carlos wants you guys backstage after the next 2 songs." I said, "Okay, Cam, we got to go, So we go down there, and we're standing there, and we're like stage left, and Cameron's standing there, and I'm Cameron's going, "Dad." I said, "What, Cam?" "I'm standing next to George Lopez." And George goes, "Hey, Butch."
Oh my God, that's so funny.
Yeah, so we're standing there, and next thing you know, Carlos walks off stage for encore. He walks right up to Cameron, and he goes, "Are you ready for this?" Cameron looks at him, "Ready for what?" And next thing, his guitar tech slings a guitar over his shoulder. He goes, "You're going to go out with me on stage?" And Cameron goes, "I can't do that. I can't do that." Carlos looks at me and goes, "Yes, you can, and yes, you will."
Wow.
So the next thing I know, Cameron's looking at me, and he goes, "Dad, did you know this?" I says, "Cameron, I'm as shocked as you are." And everybody starts laughing, and I says, "You got my kid." "No, we got you too."
That is awesome.
I had no clue.
No clue.
So the next thing you know, Carlos goes out, and Cameron's out there on stage with him in front of a couple thousand people.
Wow. And he played?
Played, he was nervous wreck, and he goes,
course.
"Carlos, don't just play E chords."
Yeah. Just play what you know. We'll play around you. Don't worry.
Yeah, because Cameron's kind of a slasher. He likes the heavy metal
He's a heavy
stuff.
metal guy.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a cool experience.
Yeah.
That's
it
one
was
to
just-
remember.
I couldn't believe it. I had to call Lori, and she was in Hawaii. I says, "You're not going to believe what just happened."
Wow.
And I wasn't there, she says.
Yeah, well, she was watching Bruno Mars.
Yeah.
What's the next one?
Well, just last May, I've been taking care of Pearl Jam and Eddie Vedder for quite a few years.
Yeah, you have.
And the nicest people, the family, his wife, the kids, the whole organization, just nice people. Well, we're driving him. I was with Urban, and we had 5 cars on it. And towards the end of the show, Pete Beadle says, "Hey, Butch, have 4 of the cars pulled down the ramp. Leave yours up there. Come on down with me." So we go in, and he goes, "Hey, go sit with Smitty. He's the Pearl Jam's manager." So I sat with him talking. Next thing I know, Eddie and the band come off for encore, and they're getting freshened up, changing shirts, drying their hair. The next thing I know, Eddie's standing right in front of me. He goes, "Let's go." I'm going, "Huh?" And then he grabs my arm. Big Pete grabs my arm. We walk out towards the stage, and I says, "What are you guys up to? Don't worry about it." So next thing you know, Eddie goes out on stage, and he starts talking, and all of a sudden he says my name. And I went, "Oh, no." Next thing I know, Pete's pushing me out on the stage in front of 18,000 people.
Got some if you need it. How's everybody back here? I can feel you. Before we continue, like I said, we've been coming here 30 years, and I've made a really good friend. He's always been there for us, and he's a legend, but you might not know who he is. You know everybody that he's gotten to the venues that you've come to see play. He was the one who drove Led Zeppelin to the Cow Palace. He's the one who drove Keith Moon and Pete Townsend to the Cow Palace in Winterland. He was the one that drove Paul McCartney here just last week. He's also Neil's favorite guy of all time, and you know we spend a lot of time in transit, and there's only one place and one person that we've ever had since the first time we came to San Francisco when we played the Bridge School that time. Since then, 92, 30 years now, he's been our confidant, our driver, and a great friend. And he never gets to stand in the spotlight, but he deserves to, and he's a handsome guy to boot. Butch, come out here and say hi, will you? Everybody, is a local hero. It's my good friend Butch Henke. Take your mask off just a second. Let them see you. See you smiling. There you go. There's Butch. I just want to express my appreciation. We love you, Butch. Okay.
Oh my gosh.
And I was just, oh, thanks, Eddie.
You must have been sweating.
Oh. And I was, everybody was a year ago, May, we were under COVID still,
Right.
I'm wearing my mask, and Eddie says, take off your mask.
Yeah. We were just coming out of that pandemic.
Yeah.
Which obviously was devastating for our industry,
Yeah.
for the rock and roll industry, everybody.
Yeah, it was the slowest I'd ever seen it been. It was like, I was almost like after 9/11, the first few months after 9/11, everybody was just
Yeah,
on
I mean,
edge.
I remember we had conversations throughout. In the beginning, we were like, oh, it's going to be a couple months thing. And then it was like, oh, now it's 6 months. And then we had to make decisions on employees and staffing. And, even you were so kind to, take a cut and stick around and get through this with us. And here we are, 2 years out of COVID at probably the greatest point of this company's existence. I mean, to think that where we were, pre-COVID, then COVID, then now, it's like, I don't, maybe the gods are watching us. I always want to believe my dad's watching us.
Yep.
My dad, loved you and David Lipschultz and all the old school guys that were in this industry, and you guys took me under your wing pretty quickly. I remember one of the first times I saw you was 2009. You were at Avalon, and I came walking in with David Lipschultz, and I had two cars. It was me and my brother-in-law Rotem, and David was like, "I'm going to sign you up as an affiliate, a local affiliate, and you're going to be working with us for the, you're going to do our overflow." And that's how I kind of started learning the business. And that between that, and I don't remember the gentleman's name, Phil,
God rest his soul.
God rest his soul. What an amazing human being.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for people like him, you, David Lipschultz, I don't know if I would have ever got to a point of understanding what was the next step I needed to do.
Yeah, at the time, I was general manager of Avalon, and, and I was looking to get out, and I was grooming Phil to take over for me there, and sadly, he got killed in a single car accident.
Yep.
And he was very young. He might have been 40-ish or so.
Yeah, he was
a
really young.
teenage son. You know.
I remember because he used to laugh at me and say that I was young enough to be his son. And jokingly, I would be. When we used to laugh, he was like, "You'd be 12 years old when you had me, Dad." Yeah. But he always, he kept me under his wing to really teach me. Yeah. Great human being. I mean, God rest his soul. And
we used to laugh. God, we used to, because we shared the same office. We had our little cubicles.
Yeah. It was, obviously where we are today. I could go on and on and on. And thank you for everything you've done for me and my family.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. I don't know what I've done other than, give you a home, I guess. And we've been very fortunate to be able to, keep seeing this go. We're not ready for you to leave. I know Lori wants you to retire.
Yeah, she'd like me to, stop driving, but I don't drive that much.
You don't. That's true.
I don't, and I took a bad fall a while back, and first time I ever knocked myself out, and I think that scared her.
Yeah, I remember.
And it was stupid. A piece of raised concrete tripped me at night while I was taking the garbage out, and I landed flat on my face, black eye, hurt my shoulder. So that bothered her. Then just before we went going on the cruise, I tripped going into the house. And I caught myself right away. I just scuffed my hand.
Right.
So she says, "It's getting close," and I said, "No, it ain't."
Yeah, it's obviously being aware of your steps and that. I don't consider you. I mean, I know you're 75 years old.
75. Yeah.
And I can say with everything, without even lying to you, that I would never have thought you were 75 because you are so active still. You're still involved in everything you're doing with your bands. You're still moving and grooving, and you're still you're always opening to learning. I mean, that's the one thing that's really impressive. I remember when you first started with us and you started using our software, you were bashing your head against the wall, and now you're like, this is a pretty easy software.
It is. It's probably one. And I've worked with a few of them.
Yeah.
Worked with Santa Cruz, which I hated.
Yeah.
Limo Magic, which was
that's
DOS-based stuff.
Yep.
And did a little bit with Livery Coach, Then that's a good software.
Yep.
But that Santa Cruz, boy,
that was rough. A lot of people. I mean, it's definitely it's a very powerful software.
Very powerful.
And there's a lot. It's a big learning curve, unfortunately. But I've heard that the minute you get you get a grasp on it, it's really strong, which is great. I mean,
and it's expensive.
Yeah, that it is. That it is. And so, two last things. I know your son. Your son's been around my life for a couple years now.
He's my hero.
Let's talk a little bit about him because I know that he's your hero, and I think that it's important to talk about people who are doing what he's doing. So, you want to give a little bit of a shout out to him and what he's doing and where he's at?
Lori and I are very, very proud of him. He graduated high school. He struggled a bit. He suffered with ADHD, and he grew out of it, And he decided he did 3 years of community college, and he came home one day and says, "Dad, I think I'm going to take your advice. I'm going to join the Air Force." So he joined the Air Force, and he loves it. Absolutely loves it. I'm missing him dearly right now. He's based in England.
Right, you told me.
Yeah, about 80 miles outside of London at a joint RAF base,
And what's his role right now? Do you know?
I really can't say too much.
Yeah, I was going to say you can't.
He works on F-15s is all I can tell you.
If I told you, I'd have to kill you.
Yeah,
that kind of thing.
Much, yeah.
Well, that's good.
But he's my hero. He is my hero. And I have a daughter.
Yep.
Desiree, I love dearly, and she's going through a little tough time. Her husband was in the Army for, 17, 18 years now, and they're going through divorce,
Rough times.
Yeah.
That's a story we can maybe talk about on another podcast.
Yeah, and then I discovered I had a daughter that I didn't know about 50 years later, and that's been a blessing,
She's awesome. I met her at your birthday party.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Weird to get that phone call saying, "I think you're my father."
Well,
50 years later.
Yeah, I mean that's a crazy story. I mean, but again, true to your nature, what I've seen is your open arms.
Yeah.
I mean, I truly believe it. Like at the period of watching you with such a new team. I mean, you came into this company, not knowing anybody other than me, and you had open arms. You treated everybody. So I can't imagine you do that any different to a daughter that you didn't even know.
Yeah. And that was an amazing story in itself.
Well, yeah. I mean, I remember you walking in the door in the office and you're like, "Dave, I have something to tell you." I'm like, "Uh-oh, here we go." You're like, "No, I have a daughter and I didn't know about it." I'm like, "Lori's going to kill you. Lori's going to kill you." But
Lori, the only things Lori says is, "How many more do you think are out there?"
That's great. Lori, I hope none. Please, we don't need any more.
Yeah. And I want to say something, my sister Kathy.
Oh, we've missed that a little bit.
She's been my right arm, since we were growing up, a year younger than me. And when I formed Squire, she was actually working for my father at the time, and she got a little tired of the craziness there, and so I hired her, and we worked out of my house. I had a large backyard. We had 5 limos in the backyard, and it just grew, and it probably wouldn't have been so successful if I hadn't had her. And she's one of my heroes,
That's awesome.
hanging in there with me. And I got to mention my girl Sam. They were a real team. My girl Sam McDaniel and my sister. We had a really tight office at Squire.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Those were the days.
Yeah.
Those are the days.
We had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
A lot of fun.
I think that's it. I think we had a good podcast. What do you think?
Good.
Yeah, you weren't as nervous.
I got some more great stories.
Hey, you know what? Maybe down the road we'll get you back on here and we'll talk about some other stories. And you did really well. You weren't as nervous as you thought you were going to be. You were easy to talk.
I get oral diarrhea now and again.
Don't we know some people in our company that are the same way?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, again.
Yeah,
Butch,
we do.
Yeah. It took him a second. Butch, thank you for not just being on here, being part of the family, being part of the team.
Thank you for having me.
We're honored. We obviously I didn't know the grasp of your connections and your relationships, but everybody I've gotten to know you always just speak very highly of you, and we're honored to have you here. And so thanks for spending some time with us on the podcast.
Yeah, I got worked with a lot of affiliates across the country, brokers. And then recently there's been 2 of them that have really disappointed me. Many years as I watched their backs.
Yeah.
And one of them, because he lost an account, it came over to me. But what are you going to do? The guy's tour manager says, Butch, if we don't go to you, he's never going back to that company, so you might as well take the account.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we've all been in those situations. Yeah. Every single one of us.
I've never solicited an advance customer.
And the honest truth is we did go and tell them what happened, and the grudge was still there. And unfortunately, we've realized that sometimes you just, got to let it go. And if they can't, there's nothing you can do. You did the respectful thing. As a company, we did a respectful thing. And, for whatever reason they want to hold on to that grudge, that's on them.
Yeah, he was upset that I didn't call him personally and tell him he was losing an account. And I says, Christ's sakes, you never called me to tell me, hey, you're taking over the Rolling Stones.
Right.
And now we got to pay you a commission?
Right.
You never called me. You know?
Listen, this industry is definitely what works for them is that whatever's good for them doesn't mean it's good for everybody else, kind of thing. Yep. So, but that's it. Well, Butch, again, thank you so much for being on here. Thanks for hanging out with us. Everybody, appreciate you following us. We're all the social medias. You can find us on Spotify, Apple podcasts. You can find us everywhere. Please take a minute and go visit our Urban Paws website. Donate there. That's a big thing. We're selling these T-shirts. These are really comfortable. They're 100% a donation straight to the foundation. So we'd really like your support. So thank you again. Thank you, Butch. And we're out of here. Good music. Not bad. Not bad.